Hi everybody, this video will be a demonstration of how to use mask within After Effects. In particular, this will be kind of a continuation of a text or type animation video that I created previously that you can look at. So we're going to use type as a basis for how to create some mask and even to animate those masks. So I have a composition. I'll cut out some of these other things that I don't need anymore. I have a composition, and I'm going to come in here and just create new text. We'll say again, hi there. Okay. Make this larger so we can see it in our composition without having to zoom in. Good. Okay, so here's my layer. In the previous video we talked about how to animate type in a couple of different ways with some effects, some animation presets, 3D and camera. So on top of all of that, we can also add mask to cover up or not display some areas, and that's the main purpose of mask. So on my text layer, a couple different ways we can do that. We can start with just like any of our rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star tools. And if I click and drag with that layer selected, it adds a new mask to this layer. So I can click and drag around the outside of it. What that does, it gives me a mask. So underneath the text, same place where effects would come up, I now have a mask layer. And with that mask selected, I can actually come in here and move that mask around and animate this mask now. So if I wanted to, I can also turn on and off the opacity of it, or if I wanted to come in here and have the text be visible for certain areas, that's another way I can do that as well. It'll kind of blur it to begin with as you're previewing it. So one way we can use a mask is for animation purposes. Of course, a mask is set up to be able to hide or unhide things, so we can cut out some areas and animate in and out of that, or just simply cut out parts of our text. So if I wanted to take a corner point and have only some of the text visible, that's one way I can use a mask, and that's kind of like a non-animation way, but definitely something that we can do. If I wanted to animate this, I could use a couple of the settings underneath the mask. So I will kind of pull this back down and move some of the points back out. After I've created this is just a rectangle tool, but then in essence it's a polygon shape now. But with the mask path, I can turn on my stopwatch for that, and then let's make sure we're over here on this first frame. Actually, we're on the last frame here. So first frame, and turn on the stopwatch. And maybe I want this path to kind of go away after a certain time. So I can come over here and move some points out of the way. I can actually move the whole thing, or I can actually move individual points. So over time, it's going to remove the text. And then at another time, it will create another keyframe. It can then come back, and let's show it this way. So I'm not going to change the size. I'm just going to click and drag and move it over here. So then you can change the points. You can move it around so it's turning on, turning off certain areas. And then this time is actually just highlighting certain letters or whatnot. So I can come in here. Let's actually just remove that one out and make a similar adjustment here. So let's maybe take one letter and make that visible. Something like that. So then it blends to one letter visible, and then maybe over time, let's go back to mask path. I can kind of move this so it's going to go, eventually just show me the last letter. So that way I can have kind of more complex motion with the mask, turn it on and off the visibility of certain areas. So basically it's a black and white mask that will tell some areas to be transparent and other areas to be opaque or visible. We can also play with like mask feathering, so that way as it blends, as it goes away, the feathering will kind of blend that. So there's an example. There's 0 feathering, and then I can feather that out more. So the further away the text is from this mask, the more it's going to blend outward. So it's kind of a smoother kind of motion. That looks pretty good there. If I click off of everything, and now watch it. It's kind of a smoother blend back and forth. And that's the mask feather. Then of course I have opacity as well, so blending of the entire layer. So there's a bunch of options with mask. So there's some basic options with a simple rectangle or polygon tool or anything like that. You can create and drag out a shape on top of that layer, and it builds a mask from that. So that's a simple way to use mask, but we'll talk about another way, a more complex way to use mask now. Let me select that mask and just delete that mask out. So my text layer is still there. And this next way, I'm actually going to draw and trace over the letters. I can create my own kind of shape this way if I don't want to use a rectangle, ellipse, polygon, star. I can also do the same steps with a custom shape with this polygon tool. So I can come in here and create this, and it will mask out just that area that's selected. And if I come in here, there's still the mask path that I can come make my adjustments to. So I can still move them around over time. So with like the mask path, if I wanted to completely change the shape of that, and do the position change quickly there. So I can come in here and have a custom shape if I wanted to. But that's not what I wanted to show here. Other options. Remove that mask back out. Other thing I can do with mask is actually trace letters and then have this kind of write the letters as I trace them. So I'm going to zoom in some so I can make sure I can get my letters kind of traced as much as I can how I want to. So with my pen tool, I'm going to click outward and actually just come in here and trace these letters according to different points. And I'm going to trace them like how I would try to think about I would draw them in a real point. So I want to trace this top line, then I'm going to come over here, and then I'm going to trace this next line down. I'm going to click outward. And then maybe I'll do this horizontal line. There you go, and trace outward, and then we'll finish it up with this kind of top section. Oops. Undo that, make sure we're not dragging on top of that. There we go. So then I'll move to my next letter and trace this letter as well. Let's see, we'll do this one. There we go, we'll do that there. Then we'll come up and put a little dot there. And then we'll move on to my next letter. So basically I'm clicking out to get to the next area of the line that I want. And I'm trying to trace this as if this was, a hand-drawn letter here. Come up here. We'll draw the top of the H. There we go. And we'll continue moving on. I'm gonna, actually we'll undo. We'll go around and start the E, kind of where most people would draw an E from. Work my way around there. And I can hold down Control and click on a point to stop that. Oops. Go back in and we'll draw it again maybe. There you go. Alright, so then we have the R. Actually, let's go back a little. There we go. Then we're going to try to trace our way back up. Then we'll come over to the second E and do the same thing we did for the first one. So you may practice with the way the shape works. But basically we're going to trace with a mask all of our letters. So it will give the impression that we're drawing each letter. Alright, so after we have the shapes created with the mask, we're actually going to add a stroke. So this is a stroke effect, and this is under generate. I'm just going to type it in, and if I find stroke under generate, I'm going to drag that on top of my layer. Alright, and with that mask, we're going to make a couple adjustments in here. So I'm going to change my paint style to reveal original image. That's going to make the text disappear to begin with. And if you have more than one mask, you may want to change the path, underneath the path to all mask. I just have one mask here. But then we can increase the brush size. So that's the thickness of the brush. And it'll draw it out to mask the entire letters. So I'm going to increase that brush size out some, not too crazy. And then what I'm actually going to animate is the end value here. So if I roll this back to 0, and then I can drag my end percentage, you can see it's going to write that text out. So it's just another way to add some more visual detail. We're using a mask this time. So I can put my, not spacing, I'm going to put my end value to 0, and then in my timeline I can hit the stopwatch for end, and then at a different time, maybe 1 second later, let's put our end to 100. So over that 1 second time, it's going to draw all of those letters out using this mask. So I actually go into my effects and change the time here. I can just drag that out so it's longer. There we go. So now that's like a 4 second. Now there's some minor issues. It's trying to draw the next letter a little bit just because of how close this point is. So you can go back and kind of refine the point some. Move this over, move this one back a little bit. There you go. So it doesn't draw the next area too early. So same thing here. I'm drawing that area too early. I might kind of move that one out of the way. So it kind of blends this a little more. There we go. So you may need to make adjustments to the way the curve looks from time to time. So this needs to move over again. Okay, we can keep playing around with this until we get kind of the line work that we want. But that's another way that we can use mask, is to come in here and draw on particular shapes or lines, and then with the stroke tool or stroke effect, then we can play around with how we are animating this to draw those lines out. So now with everything deselected, if I hit play, it'll write that text out compared to how I drew that line. That's pretty interesting, a different variation there. There's a bunch of other ways that we can create animation or use masking in different ways, but those are some basic introduction steps for using masking. And that'll wrap up this video on masking, especially with text layers, fonts in After Effects.